All right, I would like to call the Citizen Advisory Board meeting for today, Friday, March 14th, 2025. All right, I would like to call the Citizen Advisory
Chair, I'd like to make the
Board
motion
meeting for-
to remove item
Can
number.
I do the roll? I'll do the roll.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Good morning. My name is Georgia Greenlee, Secretary of the Board for CTA. I'll take roll. Scott Vanderwill.
Here, go ahead.
Tracy Powell.
Here.
Caroline Pavlovic.
Hi, here.
Ryan McCray.
Here.
Aiden Keith.
Here.
Chairperson Raby.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Johnson.
Here.
Peter Henderson.
Here.
Emmanuel Garcia.
Here.
And Robert Castaneda.
Here.
Chairperson Raby, you do have a quorum with 7 full members who have voting power here and 2 student members in attendance.
Okay, great. I would like to,
Oh, you need to stand up so she can recognize.
Oh.
Stand. Say
we
the chair
recognize-
recognizes.
The chair recognizes Robert Castaneda for comments.
Madam Chair, I'd like to propose that we amend the agenda to remove item number 3, defer item number 3, reviewing the minutes. And then for item number 4, switch the order of B and C.
And do we have a second?
A second.
It's been moved by Robert Castaneda, and seconded by Peter Henderson, that the minutes of the Citizens Advisory Board that was held on January 30th, 2025 be deferred to the next meeting, and that the order for items 4B and 4C be reversed. We'll take a roll call vote. Scott Vanderwill.
Yes.
Tracy Powell.
Yes.
Caroline Pavlovic. Yes. Ryan McCray.
Yes.
Chairperson Raby.
Yes.
Rob Johnson.
Yes.
Peter Henderson.
Yes.
Sonia Del Real.
Yes.
Robert Castaneda.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
Fabulous. All right, so we will move into agenda item number 4, which is the CIB working session. We'll be discussing or listening to presentations to help us guide our goals and objectives for 2025. We'll start with item A, is a presentation and discussion with the CPA custom personas and trip journey mapping.
Hey, everyone. Everyone have a copy of this guy, this document right here?
No.
All right, I can hand him out.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the one.
Just like her. Jump it out. That's fine. Great.
We will figure it out.
Okay.
All right, we'll do some intros and then we'll go into the presentation. So good morning, everyone. I'm Lucian Lepiertz, Senior Manager for Customer Experience, CTA. Been here for about 2.5 years. My role is mostly like special projects that help CTA address some of our most pressing customer-facing issues and then also make the organizational culture a little bit more customer-centric.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emily Drexler. I'm the Senior Manager for Customer Insights and Strategy. I've been at CTA for, I think, about 9 years almost, and my team is responsible for a couple of different things. We do customer market research, but today I'm sitting up here because my group oversees the Innovation Studio program. So Lucian's going to share some info, and we want to get your feedback for sort of next stages for that program and some of the challenges that we're going to be putting out to the private sector and to others.
Awesome. So at a super high level, at first, I'm going to talk you guys through some background on the document that's in front of you. Then we'll have some time for you to look at the information, digest it a little bit. And after that, I'm going to pass out another handout, which has one question on it that we want to have a discussion about. And that'll be a really good segue into Emily's presentation. So as some background about this document that you're looking at, when CPA started on this customer experience journey in 2022, one of the first things that we wanted to do is figure out, okay, we know in the future, we're going to be working on specific projects, new initiatives, sponsoring things. We want to have a tool that helps us prioritize those projects and really bring the voice of the customer and the way customers use CTA into those decisions, right? And so the tool that we decided to develop is right in front of you, and it's a version of a customer journey map. And so the two most important things to understand, I think, about this document is number one, that from left to right, there are different moments in time. These are moments in someone's travel journey, you know, all the way from the first moment when they decide, hey, I want to take a trip somewhere in Chicago, all the way through their journey on CTA and ending at the moment when they decide, okay, was that trip good? Was that trip bad? You know, do I want to use CTA again? And we certainly hope folks want to use CTA again, right? But that's one of the most important things that we kind of outlined, you know, what are those moments in time that we want to focus on? And also, as you'll notice, some of those moments aren't directly controlled by CTA, right? We're being influenced by other actors in the city, other actors in our world. And that was also important to call out because it helps us have that discussion around, you know, in order to deliver a great transit experience, CTA needs to do a lot of work, but we also need to partner with a lot of folks too. And so the second thing that I think I really want to call out is that on the different pages, there's different colored sections. And what those correspond to are different segments of customers. And what we're trying to really map out is, you know, certainly there's a generic or shared experience of folks that use CTA, but there are other lenses that, you know, interact with us, right? There are folks with disabilities, folks that don't speak English as their first language, people that ride a lot, people that ride a little. And so we wanted to call out, okay, what are a couple of different lenses that can help us have a fuller understanding of the people that use CTA and the different experiences that we need to optimize for, right? And so I think that's really the most two important things to think about in the structure of this document, you know, left to right, moments in time, and then page by page, these different segments that have different relationships. Anyone have any questions before I move on to the next part of my discussion?
I just have one question about some of the statements here. Are these like actual statements or like a, kind of like a culmination of different statements that you've received and kind of made cleaner for us to understand here?
Yeah, totally. So all the different little boxes of information that you're looking at come from a couple different data sources. One data source is super important is a lot of the work that Emily does, which is the market research surveys that are distributed to thousands upon thousands of customers on a regular basis. And so those insights are kind of distilled into these little facts. And so like these are like true things that we know about our customers. There are other boxes which data from the United States Census, other boxes that use data from other mandated surveys or mandated studies that is required to do either by the federal government or local governments. And so information from our venture taps about how people use the system. So when you look for boxes, it's really like, these are all different things that we know to be true about our customers, and they've been validated through different mechanisms. All right, so what I'll do is I'll set a timer for 5 minutes for folks to read through the document, check out some of the cool things that are in there. There's a lot of really interesting information. And after the 5 minutes are up, I'm gonna pass out a handout that has one question that we'll start to discuss, and I think will lead to a pretty interesting. So I'll start that timer now, and then I'll hand it out a buzz when we're done. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to pass out the discussion question. When I come back, I'll read it into the record, and then we can sort of have a discussion among all of us about this question. All right, so I think there are certainly probably different pieces of information that stood out to everyone. And also, I'm assuming many folks also started to see stories of our customers, right, in information. So the document I handed out reads, this document maps out the multiple steps in a customer's journey and the areas that create challenges for our writers. Over the next year, CTA is going to undertake several new strategic initiatives and continue to invest in our Innovation Studio pilot project program, which will be a great segue, which Emily's going to talk about in more detail. When you think about 2025, 2026, what are some things that you guys think CTA should really focus on? And specifically, what are maybe some new projects that we should test out, new spaces that we should show up in that we haven't? And do those ideas that you're thinking about, do they show up in the customer journey map, right? Is there a link between these ideas that I'm prompting for you guys for and the journey map that we're looking at right now? So I guess now it's time for us to have a discussion. We're certainly open to hearing from everyone. If you guys want to provide email feedback later on too, that's super cool. But I'll let us have a discussion for a couple of minutes and then we can hand it over to Emily to talk a little bit more about Innovation Studio.
And just to clarify, or I'm going to insert this, just like we did with the security meeting, and we had a list of recommendations, advisements that went to the board, that is what the goal is for today as well, all around the issue of service and service delivery and the customer experience. So it's great, yes, to give everything to them, but we are also pulling together those bullet points so that they can be reported back to the board.
Guess I'll start. Just kind of looking through it high level, seems like there's a lot of opportunity. And I kind of sense this in some of the programming I'm seeing you guys announce and roll out, just towards buses being, a very key component of just improving the overall experience, I think if I were to drill down a little more in that, it seems like there's some attention paid to kind of bus only lanes, making trips easier. I know we're going to talk about the enforcement also. So I think all of that kind of the high level, like the bus experience, it seems like providing some sort of priority to them. And then, there's that automated enforcement pilot. Is it automated? I forget, but the bus lane enforcement pilot, I would maybe go a step beyond that even and just say, like curb enforcement in general. I understand. I'm fortunate enough that I live off of a bus lane. And when it works, it's great. But if someone has parked their car there during a time they're not, in some ways it's worse than not having a bus. And that's like pretty discouraging as well. And I just, the way that transportation and mobility seems to be moving, like there's always a constant fight for the curb. I'm fortunate enough that I don't have a disability, but I see it dropping my son off. We take the bus and in the morning, the drop off, it's chaotic. And most days it's just annoying and kind of riles me up a little bit. But I've seen days where there are senior citizens and they have a walker and they literally cannot get to the bus. Someone has to get out and help, literally, like in some cases, pick them up. I've seen once because they cannot access, the bus cannot access the curb. And it's an inconvenience. I'm maybe using a bit of hyperbole, but it's antisocial in a lot of ways. And I think that's something we can drill down on.
I want to echo what Robert said about the bus lanes. Where I live just off of Clark Street on the north side, and where I live, there are really frequent problems with delivery truck drivers parking in bus stops, parking in the bus lane during the times that it's a bus only lane. There was even I think they've cleaned this up now, but historically there was a business who would literally set up like a full-on like enclosed patio in the bus lane so that it was unusable. I think expanding, the enforcement out to other neighborhoods, especially areas that are kind of hotspots around the city instead of just downtown, I think should be a big priority. I was also looking through some of the disability focused stuff. And I noticed that there were multiple different categories of disability where people said that they are struggling to get to CTA stops because of sidewalks. I know that things have been really up in the air with getting things cleared if that the sidewalk pilot goes through in the city. And even when I report things that are like an uneven sidewalk, like I have open complaints with CDOT from like 2022 of things on the sidewalk that are not like safe. So I think it should be definitely be a big priority with CTA of trying to work with the city to get those things fixed very promptly. Trying to get better response times for sidewalk issues that occur on the way to a CTA stop. And then finally, I also noticed that you're looking at people who are enrolled in like reduced fare free ride programs with people with disabilities. I didn't see any data on like what % of survey respondents are in one of those programs and what are not. I think it would be helpful to like do, more outreach to disabled folks who might be eligible for those programs. I personally, I never really thought of myself as like disabled enough to be in those kinds of programs because I'm like able to work full time. People a lot of the time don't think that I'm disabled when they first meet me, unless they're like a trained medical professional. People can't tell that I'm disabled. But I've also heard of like, people who have like a similar disabilities to me who have gotten into those programs. I'm like, wait, am I eligible? So I think just more outreach. And I also noticed that like seniors, like people 65 and over are eligible. And I don't know that like every single senior who's eligible for the program is going to be enrolled in that. So just more outreach to people who may be eligible, who might not be enrolled in those programs.
I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me was how much of this stuff revolved around transfers. So there's a statistic on the front page that said that 33% of customers self-reported that a typical CTA trip involved one transfer, 28% said two. I think like when I'm planning a trip using CTA, my first inclination is to try to find the route with the fewest transfers because I think it's often a very difficult process, especially if you're not familiar with the system. So I think one of the biggest things is sort of a unified wayfinding system that is universal because different stations have different ways of, directing you. Like if you're at Howard, the system of how to figure out which bus you're going to get on is different than it is downtown or at 95th. And so I think like that's a big thing, improving wayfinding. I think also just trying to synchronize schedules as much as possible, especially with Metra. Like, a lot of the Metra stops have easy bus connections, but, the buses, sometimes you have to wait 15 minutes and the Metra schedule is pretty reliable. So I'd imagine it's pretty easily implementable or whatever to to try to synchronize that. And like, I think that in general, just as a cultural thing, like there's a lot of other cities that have a culture of strong transfers, like, you know, that it's just easy to do it and everybody does it and it's part of their trip. And I don't feel like CTA really has that. And so I think just making that process easier, especially for people who aren't familiar with the system, would be a huge help, especially as like, you know, more people work from home, less people are going into the loop. People are going to have to make more transfers in order to get to the places that they're going. So I think that should be an area of focus over the next couple of years.
And I'll just add to the point about just people who are unfamiliar with the system and, you know, newer to the system or newer to the city or visitors. I noticed that there's a difference in like the infrequent versus frequent riders and the types of fare that they're choosing to use. Where infrequent riders use bank cards because it's just my assumption, and this is based off of my experience of traveling to other cities where it was not easy to find or, you know, locate the vending machine or, you know, wherever you would go to buy like whatever the pass is for that city. And I'm assuming that it's probably a similar challenge for visitors. Like, how do you access a Venture card, or how do you even know about the app? Like, there's not a lot of material, at least from what I've seen, on like instructions, like download this app so that you can take advantage of you know, the small discount. Because when you use your bank card, you're charging an additional amount to use the bank card. Like, at least, I don't know for CTA, I don't know that, but I know when I've traveled to other places and I've had to use my bank card, there was an additional charge from the bank because I used it to tap onto transit. So I don't know if that's what people's experiences are today, but that's something to consider. And, you know, just kind of trying to help new folks get on board with using the app if they're not able to purchase a Venture.
Awesome.
To go back to what you were saying, I've used the bank card before. And you do get charged extra. You get a $5 pending charge. Yeah, it's a hold. With that $5 pending charge, do you get the free transfer? Or if you transfer from a train to a bus, you have to, like, they get recharged as another $5.
There's no free transfers.
You do get free transfers. I think it's the same rules where it's, you get 2 additional transfers within 3 hours, I believe. But I guess to your point, like the fact that it's so obscure is certainly something to work through.
And then if you're, you know, charging like I remember seeing a $5 charge and the fare is $2.50. So, I mean, I use a Venture card, so I don't keep the fares in my head because it's just, but, you know, knowing that it's significantly cheaper and you're getting charged this extra amount, you know, can be an issue. And so that's definitely something that, and then also one other thing, I don't really have a question about it, but it's something I'm curious to learn more about, like how are you guys kind of using this information? Is the differences in the income of people who are riding the system daily versus those who are not? Is this a big difference? I feel like, I mean, folks that are infrequent riders are like, the average was like 150, the income of $150K a year.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's a significant, like from $15K a year, you know, I'm just wondering, I want to know more about the story there. I mean, I can come up with a few assumptions, but like, how is CTA taking that information and better understanding that demographic difference?
Yeah, I think one way that we use that and that this call out has helped us is, you know, understanding how when people respond to feedback or send us complaints or contact us in general, it helps us understand where they're coming from. Like, is this person, you know, very high income user that maybe rides a train to get to a baseball game once in a while? Or is it someone who's depends on CTA every day, right? And that needs different decisions. I can't really go into specifics, but I think it helps us frame our decisions in a way that's cognizant of those sensitivities.
I'll share. The data on this actually was decent. I want to piggyback off of both of you guys' comments about, ridership and, just looking around, making sure wayfinding is much easier. I'll give an example. I think it was last Sunday. I volunteered 4 hours at Roosevelt and Wabash when the Green Line had the reroute. And there were some people who came to Chicago for the first time needing to get, back to Midway, and they said that the customer service assistant they didn't understand Ventura, they didn't understand where to go, if they needed to take the green line or the orange line. And I was there and I was explaining to them, you're on the right platform, whatever says Midway, you just take that train, take it all the way to the end of the line and then where you need to go from there. So definitely making sure that people who haven't come to Chicago frequently or just like their first time, making sure that it's more easier for them to understand, because for Venture with certain people, they don't know like, okay, should I get a 1 day pass? Should I just get an actual card if I'm gonna be here? And I said, I start with, okay, how long are you gonna be here? And I could give them, you need a 7 day or you just need a single ride or you just need a 1 day. So try to differentiate which ones, people need. So definitely, wayfinding, making sure that people have a mutual understanding of how to get to where they need to go without feeling so overwhelmed and like, okay, well, this is, and then they move away from CTA because, if something is too challenging for you, sometimes they're like, okay, I'm gonna back away because I'm like, if I can't figure it out now and I talk to 3 people and they haven't helped me and I haven't understand it yet, then I don't know where I'm gonna go here. So most definitely. Thank you though.
My comment is really quite simple, and that is that what I have heard from everyone is the word convenience and consistency.
Awesome. So I think.
We got one more.
Oh, sorry.
Here, thanks for sharing all this information, taking time to get some feedback. I would probably say, when I look at like what the CTA is doing in response to a lot of these things, I do find it interesting that a lot of the proposed things, and I'm reading this correctly, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the proposed things are things that would require like, in some cases, like significant investment at a time when like the CTA is saying like there's no money. And when I look at all the different populations, except for the non-English speakers, they're just like trying to learn how to use the system. But everybody else is saying like safety is a big issue. And when I look at the suggestions so far, there's a couple of them that refer to safety, but a lot of them is more like service oriented. And I would say like my experience is right. Like most people, yeah, there's the issue of like the ghost buses, which I think the CTA is doing a much better job, right, with consistency and even talking about like those. I mean, just this morning, like where I would normally, the bus wouldn't show up. I saw like 3 buses this morning, right, all perfectly staggered at their. I'm like, oh, okay, it's moving nicely today. So that's always good to see. But I think compared to like yesterday, man shot getting on the bus, right? Like all of these constant stories that people are getting. And what I thought was really interesting is that I read somewhere in there that tourists are more likely to recommend the CTA than like local people who use it regularly. And so what that tells me is that we know how to deliver a safe experience in certain parts of the city. And so for me, with my background, it's we do a lot around like working with public spaces and perception of safety. And even though like the crime rate is down, even though statistically things are improving, most people don't feel that way. And so I think it's worth investigating what does it look like to assess perceptions of safety within CTA. And if you look at it, just like the research across the board, right? What the research says that the number way to increase perception in public spaces is having diversity of age and gender in those spaces. And in our last meeting, we were talking about safety. We talked about like New York City. And if you go to New York City, you'll see all these little kids taking the bus and the train to school in the morning by themselves, like 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. That's not Chicago, right? We have this whole separate bus system that we hire private buses and because even within our system, we don't trust our public system to get our kids to and from where they need to go by themselves. And so I think that's really the big challenge for us, right? Like, how do we, at the very nature of perception of public safety, how do we make this transit system a place where we have diversity in age and gender? So little kids all the way from, boys and girls, all the way up to elderly, regularly using it and then feeling safe. And then the second thing is, right, impacts of perceptions of public safety is the built environment, right? Is it clean? And I had mentioned in our last meeting that over on State and Lake, I had a standing meeting for like a year and a half, and for a whole year and a half, there was a food stain on the door. And right, that like stuff like that, right? I think we already have budgets. We talked about last time, we have like the security firms like stand around. Maybe we're incorporating checklists about what does it mean for a station to look clean, because that can all be tied back to safety. But one of the things I thought was really, really cool on here, and it's not a safety thing, it's more of a personal user convenience thing. The joint Ventura Divvy Pass, like, because like I think like Lyft, they provide a thing, and so you pay like $250 for the year, and you get like unlimited lifts and whatnot. And so I think that's a lot of people with like biking and whatnot, to be able to tie that into your bus pass. I'd be willing to pay a little more for like a monthly pass or a weekly pass, knowing I can use it for Divvy. And like they're looking for ridership, we're looking for ridership. And a lot of times you just don't want to wait for the bus, especially when it's nice, like in the spring and the summer, and the whole Divvy bike thing is full. And it's like, I just need to go like 5 blocks away, and I don't want to, it's probably more work to take a bus, but to be like, I paid and I get my free transfer on a Divvy bike, that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has any other comments, we're certainly welcome to receiving them via email. Georgette will be collecting them too for your board recommendations. And now Emily will talk about some pretty cool stuff for Innovation Studio.
Yeah, so I don't have any slides or anything, but I think we've come to this group before with information about the Innovation Studio program. Hopefully I'm seeing nods, so there's some familiarity there. So the program began with board approval in 2023, and we launched our sort of first round of problem statements last year in 2024. And we're now getting up and running with some of those pilot projects, which is really exciting. We put out 3 different problem statements on different topics. One was about customer experience, one was about safety on the rail system, and the other was more of like an internal process improvement for staff. So now it's 2025, and we're looking to launch some new challenges, new problem statements to the public, to the private sector and other partners that are interested in applying. So we're hoping to put out a challenge in like late April, early May, and then we'll probably follow that up later this year with 1 or 2 more. We're going to stagger them this time because doing 3 at once was a lot. So, based on kind of the information you just looked over, I think, from the discussion, I noted some ideas. I think that could make for good challenges, but if there's, topics that maybe is not in this list of what CTA is already doing in 2025, if there's ideas that you have about problems we could put out to that technology community, happy to hear what those are. In general, we're looking for, problems that we don't have a clear solution for, where we can, test out a couple of different new technologies, see what works, and then go from there to expand to the system. So I hope that's enough information to go on, but if there's any ideas either now or later on that you want to share with us, just let me know.
I noticed they're using AI camera systems piloting for gun detection.
Yes.
And the thing about like the transit system is like a lot of times you have like with any in I think for crime in general, it's like a repeat offender. And so, you hear these stories about, an individual who attacked somebody on a train, and they had done it already like 5 other times before, right? Is there any thought around using technology to detect people who are not supposed to be riding transit system because of previous, bad acts, right? Like they've attacked people, and don't get me wrong, it's like, you have people experience like, mental health trauma and whatnot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should be allowed to just wander on and be a, like threaten people. So because people can't be everywhere at one time and you're still trying to figure out the whole like security policing thing in CTA, any thought around using cameras and technology to detect folks?
Potentially, we can think about that a little bit and work with our security department. We're really open to any and all ideas. If there's like a cool product you've seen out there in the world or another transit system, I think we're just, looking to generate different ideas to decide which to go forward with.
Yeah, because
I'll jot that down.
yeah, the AI technology is there now and it's relatively inexpensive. And so the potential to do, I mean, you're gonna have a whole other issue regarding like, people and freedom, like as far as like being detected and everything and how that's handled. But I think from a security standpoint, because it is something that you're paying for, I don't think really you're going into an act anyway to be like, monitored while you're in that system. So I don't see it being as big of an issue for CTA.
I would just would be cautious with that kind of technology because it's not at a state currently where it's not a mindful tool at this point in its development, like AI in general. And I think that there could be some civil issues.
Or like potential negative ramifications, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I just think about like how that could impact, especially minorities. Like, I think that could be a thing that we wouldn't want to deter folks from using the system because they could be picked up in a facial recognition software. There's already people being, arrested for things that they didn't do because the software didn't, pick up their identity correctly and misidentify them or something.
Yeah, I agree with her. The technology is still around facial recognition. It's still not resolved its issues with identifying Black and brown and Asians, colored people. We would definitely run into some issues with that. I'm sure at some point they will resolve it, but right now there's a big debate around using facial recognition, particularly in cities where.
And we're also, being a sanctuary city and, we're already over policed. I would just be cautious about how to, use that kind of technology.
Yeah, I think you guys all talked about, safety that's like, popped up in this journey map. So I think, maybe if it's not that exactly, like some type of personal safety challenge could be a good one, and we can think a little bit more about what that would look like. I think there's also like some good accessibility technologies out there that we're thinking about too. But if there's anything else that comes to mind, either just, there's like a topic, you guys talked a lot about like the transfers and issues with transfers. Maybe that's something we could think about as well addressing. So we'll keep those all in mind.
What are the accessibility technologies you're considering?
So there are, I think there's like a wide gamut from, I guess the whole spectrum is infrastructure related improvements such as different tactile surfaces or other, more hardware based solutions. And then there's also software where there's many companies now that offer services either to provide live interpretation. If someone needs to interact with like a customer service assistant needs help. There are other services that map out spaces and then provide an app that makes it easier to navigate complex spaces like vibrations, other things. And so I think we have a separate group that's trying to figure out, okay, what's our perspective on all these different tools, and specifically there are some grants out there that CTA is looking to apply for. And so it's like, okay, which of these applications maybe make sense for grants, maybe which application makes sense for innovation studio, type of thing. I think our group is still working on, what's our perspective, because there's a very broad landscape. And there are different ways to move forward on each of those different tactics, I guess.
Well, in the interest of time, we're going to wrap it up. But if we have additional comments and questions, we'll be sure to get those to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was a really great conversation and I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, really, thank you guys.
Hey, next up, we have the presentation on CDOT's intergovernmental agreement.
Sure. Edith's not here. I do. Let me try and figure out how to get this up.
Yeah. Sure.
Would I be able to control it here or I just, no, you know?
That's a good question. All these questions.
Okay, thank you.
I'll be right back.
Sorry for that. I do think these visuals will be helpful for this bus lane enforcement presentation, so.
No worries, we understand.
Yeah, he could.
Yeah.
You're good with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, y'all saw. Get off. No.
80 degrees today.
Looking like 30, 40,
Did I? Yeah, just because that's blocking maybe some of their.
Yeah.
Their way to.
All right.
Pushing on. Yeah, you can minimize. Sorry, I did it on here, but I realized that didn't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the south to move over.
Oh, you'll do, okay. Well, I'll get started. Thank you for your time today. So I'm Angela. I'm a senior project manager in transportation engineering in the planning and innovation department. And I'll be talking about the Smart Streets pilot, our automatic bus lane enforcement. So as you know, we've had a good addition of bus lanes, but our bus lanes and bus stops require compliance to function properly. And so we've had a lot of issues with that, and it only works as far as if it is forced. So our operational performance and reliability of our bus service is severely affected when there are parked or standing vehicles in our bus lanes. We've had a lot of cars and trucks delivery, mainly delivery trucks, that block our lanes and stops, which will cause delays, and then that affects all of our entire corridor. And so these issues have been addressed in other cities already, which are listed: New York, Washington, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia. So the idea is that we do have bus mounted cameras, and we would use license plate recognition to help with the violations that will be put out. So the Smart Streets pilot is a certain area right now. Chicago, North Avenue, Ashland, Roosevelt are the boundaries. Eventually, hopefully to expand upon that, but right now the area that we're focused on. So right now we have it on bus lanes, bus stops, and bike lanes. And so right now, end of last year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that next slide, but cameras are already mounted on CDOT and Department of Finance vehicles, and they will be mounted on CTA buses. So this wasn't allowed in the city before, but we had city council approve that a while back, having this pilot test running for 2 years from the date of the first issue. So that happened end of last year. So we have now 2 years from that point. And so CDOT and DOF must submit a report to city council 120 days prior to the pilot ending, and of our findings, violations, the number of violations, the fines accrued, all of that will be presented to city council and to the public. So in the map, you see our bus lanes being in red and all the bike lanes in green. So as I said, implementation began end of last year for 8 vehicles that the city owns. So in between December to February, we've had over 6,000 violations. There was a 30-day warning period in November. And then after December 5th, drivers would get their first warning. And then if they had another one, then a ticket would follow. So through that period, there have been over 5,500 warnings. And that's broken down right now, or not broken down, but the tickets that came out of that in that time period, 596 have been related to bus lane violation and 186 for bike lanes. So we just got board approval on Wednesday for a contract. So CTA will be working with Hayden to deploy those cameras on 6 of our buses. And then we have an option to increase, adding 94 other buses if we want. So it is a US-based company and market leader. A lot of other cities I mentioned that already have this, they work with Hayden as well. So there will be an onboard processor along with 2 windshield mounted cameras. And then we'll work with the vendor in mapping out of that pilot area, all the bus lanes, bus stops, bike lanes. And then we'll be working with city and Department of Finance with the ticketing process. So the violation identification ticketing process goes like this. So on bus, we would have the AI identifying the violation, knowing where the bus lane, bus stop, bike lane is, also knowing time of day. Those are also metrics of when bus lanes are enforced on certain corridors right now, right? And then bus location. So doing a lot all at once. We would be using images and video as well. That differs from the city, as those are all just images right now, photos. And then all that information gets is packaged securely and uploaded to a hosted server, and that's reviewed by the vendor, by Hayden. If a violation is identified, then that information is all transferred over to the city's Department of Finance. And then over there, they have staff review that too. So there's a two-step review process. And then tickets are issued by, via mail by the city. Right now, tickets for the fines, if they are bike lanes, it's a $250 ticket. If it is violation on the bus lane, it is 90. And if it's on violation on the bus stop, then that's 100.
I had a question. Will there be a separate penalty for commercial vehicles? Like you said, that the biggest infraction are delivery trucks.
Right now, no. And that's something working with the city as we go through this process and have a lot of data collection, say, hey, what can we do? No, nothing's defined or finalized right now, but would there be a graduated ticketing system? Would there, as you said, if it is commercial, would that be at a higher level? Right now, just as we're working on this with the city and just the processing and violations, working out any kinks before we get to figuring out, a better or more refined ticketing system based on the type of vehicle that is out there. But I should.
Is that a conversation? Has that issue, which Caroline also raised earlier in the meeting, of Amazon, different trucks, delivery trucks, is that a conversation?
Just a very initial one, but it's nothing that would be more on city and Department of Finance of working closely with them, but they would be the kind of final sayers on that. So.
And then I had a follow-up. Will the city of Chicago be receiving part of that ticket revenue? Like, how will you all split that money?
Right. So I should stress in the beginning as well, and I was going to do that at the end, but the idea for us, for CTA and the city, is that we're not hoping this to be, long-term revenue generating. We want people to, if they get the warning and the violation, to say, all right, I know now what not to do, which is to be in these lanes and to stop that behavior. We're wanting this to be safety for pedestrians, for cyclists, for our customers first. And so that is the idea, because it's not like, well, built in to say for years on time, we're wanting this to be revenue every year. We're really trying to curb the behavior of drivers to not be in these lanes that we put in a lot of money for this infrastructure, right? For the reliability of our bus, for our buses. Right now, all of it, any revenue doesn't go, it goes back to the city right now. There's a pool for it, nothing set aside specifically back to CTA right now. And again, like we said, we're not trying to say, hey, we're wanting that, like red light tickets, like we're wanting this to be revenue generating. We really, on our end for CTA, our biggest goal is that we can utilize our infrastructure, the roadway infrastructure as intended.
Okay, I have a question, and it's going to go a little bit further back. When determining these lanes, is there any consideration given to the businesses that need to receive goods and deliveries? Particularly in the loop, you'll find some buildings don't actually have alleys or ways to deliver things. I'm just wondering, like, if I've got a business right there and you guys decide to do a bus lane, and now I have no way to park trucks and stuff to drop off materials, drop off.
Yes, definitely considered. We don't look at it as just, all right, here's our bus and we get the whole, block or a couple of blocks. We work very closely with the city. We do have our traffic planning group that does work closely in looking at all of these plans, design plans, to talk about businesses, to talk about driveways, talk about, where it would go.
Process open so that businesses can have a say in whether this makes sense for them. Maybe they decide they need to move their business because it's just not, because that's a serious issue that we have sometimes getting deliveries, particularly on busy streets. I got a Millennium Park, my Millennium Park location. We have a very small like dock area. It's built in 2000, so they didn't think through everything. Sometimes folks got to stop on Michigan Avenue and drop off materials just to get out. So, you know, did the businesses ever have some say? Is that something that would have to happen with the city? Is it, you know, I know you guys do notice and all that kind of stuff, but.
Sure. Actually, Jason, out that traffic planning piece. I mean, the CDOT with businesses on streets, yeah.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Well, it was just really the process for determining the lanes, bus lanes. What were the businesses taken in consideration when making a determination that we should put a bus lane here? Where obviously potentially delivery trucks would get ticketed or towed because they're stopping to drop off materials and supplies to businesses that don't have any choice but to receive off the street.
Right, absolutely. And it's definitely a trade-off when we put in bus priority infrastructure, you know, the benefits versus inconveniences for other roadway users. And looking where to put bus lanes, you know, not only do we look at like the high ridership and, you know, high congestion where buses get tied up, but also the curbside use always comes into play and is part of the conversation. In some areas, you know, we targeted peak hour only bus lanes so that, you know, there's opportunities for loading and parking and other activities during the rest of the hours of the day. In some cases, we, like on Chicago Avenue, further west of where the pilot is, we have offset bus lanes. So there's parking against the curb, then the bus lane, then the travel lane. So that way there's still that curbside space available for loading, things like that. And then in some cases, you know, it's really, you know, this you can only do a curbside. That's the only place it will fit. And there will be parking impacts that, you know, there won't be places to load that's as convenient as it used to be. But, you know, that might be the really, you know, highest frequency, highest ridership. And, you know, in those cases, you know, I was one of the people that on Chicago Avenue through River North had to go door to door to businesses and explain the impacts. We worked with CDOT to, you know, some cases, so it's around the corner to the side, so where it was being parking, trying to have a loading zone there.
Gotcha.
So it's really a case by case basis, but yeah, we always do take that into consideration.
That's good. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Do you have a relationship with bike lane uprising that is already capturing from the riders' photographs of the bike lanes being blocked in the city? I would think your statistic of 186 in that district are relatively low, but bike lane uprising has those statistics for not only Chicago, but other communities in the entire country.
We don't right now, I believe the city, they would be more in communication with them with their bike lanes. Since they're the ones who do build it and are trying to maintain it.
So you mentioned that there was that before the end of the pilot, CDOT and Department of Finance are going to submit a report to the city council. I guess my question is from CTA's perspective, what are like the metrics of success that you're going to look at for this program? Is it improvements in travel time? Is it tickets issued? Like what numbers are you looking at to kind of give your take to CDOT in terms of like whether we continue this or not?
Yeah, all of that, honestly. I mean, until we run it, we go through it, you know, hopefully, yes, that we do have better runtime of our buses, the operators, right? They're not having to merge in and out. They're able to utilize the bus lanes as much as possible. And yeah, I mean, we would ideally, with that, we would also assume a decreased number of violations with that.
Let me ask more specifically. So the Hayden AI contract is for 3 years, but when will we look at expanding beyond just 6 buses for that? Is it at the end of the 3 years?
No, so right now we are on a kind of expedited time frame because we have the pilot for 2 years, and that when they start at the end of last year, they've done the clock, they started the clock down, right? The timer stopwatch. So we're going, hopefully we would have cameras on buses in the next couple of months. We would have some tests. We'd need to do calibration testing, which probably about 2 months there before we have it out in maybe the Q3 fall of this year. And again, we have to do a 30-day warning period, just like the city did, right? So first 30 days is just warnings. And then after that, drivers, the first violations get warning, the second would be ticket. And so then with the next batch of the 94 buses, right now our funding is for the 6 buses. We would have to line up and make sure we'd have all the funding for the 94 buses or however many buses we could get, depending on, with our funding process right now. But that could immediately be started as we get the 6 buses out there and doing the AI work already. So right now we don't know, but we do have it set in the schedule if we do have the funding for it immediately to put in the 94 buses. But really, as we said, like AI and camera, like we need to make sure everything is functioning very well with these 6 buses before we just send out a bunch. And we also would have to work with DOF because now you have more processing. You have more cameras, you have more processing, more staff needed for evidence review. So there's a lot that would go hand in hand with that scalability.
Could you go back, I think there's some data about like how much the contract, like the costs of all this.
Yeah, I think. All right, that may come up. Yeah. So right now, sorry, I thought I had it in. So the contract, and it is, since our board approved, is about, for these 6 buses right now is about 315,000.
How is it 50,000 a bus? That doesn't really make a lot of sense.
So there's a camera, so you have a processing unit. You do have the AI piece of this is the most important, right?
Yeah.
Not, so as it goes, you can see the detection of vehicles, the license plate. So the ALPR is the automated license plate recognition software. So that is another piece where it is. So it's not just the camera alone, but the processing behind that camera and of when they get to, their server of identifying and making sure we're not sending out the violations incorrectly. So there's more to it than just the camera itself. And then we also have training of the Hayden AI staff to CTA staff. So there's time and money that goes towards that as well.
Is that number comparable to the other transit agencies that did the same program?
Yeah, and right now, as I said, like a lot of them did start as a pilot. They didn't just do full force. So it was always a pilot and then they expand based on, yes, the results.
One other question, have you considered other options, either as a substitute or a complement to this? Like having static cameras in like high volume areas or even implementing, like Scott mentioned, there's Cycling Uprising is a very successful project. The opportunity for like a citizen bounty program for reporting violations.
I believe it's been considered and talked about. Yes, the stationary cameras, I think, obviously there's other cameras that the city has, but for different purposes. For this, because of this piece is also the license plate recognition software. Right, you could have cameras everywhere, but to detect on the license plate, reading it out, then sending it out to, again, Department of Finance, then they send it to the like DMV to getting all that information so the tickets get out. Like that piece is where having it on the bus so that we see it in real time and having that video is next step than having a stationary camera. And we'd have to have them at a lot of different locations if we want to do that. But this is our buses, which, at some point so our testing in this pilot area, right now it's not finalized and we have to have a kickoff meeting with the vendor. But with 6 buses out of different garages, we're planning on and trying on different locations. So it gives us that opportunity to move around. And then certainly as we expand, hopefully more buses, but we have an entire fleet of 1,800 buses. So moving up to even 100 buses, which is great, that's still a small percentage of our entire network. So it's discussed, it's not a no, but for now, this is something we'll get started on and we'll see how the results pen from that. But I think the movable aspect of these cameras, whether it is on the bus, we can also move them off certain buses if need be, gives us that flexibility.
Yeah, what about Citizen Bounty?
That one I'd have to confirm with others of what is the communication been so far with them.
Yeah. Go, because you have.
I was just gonna ask, I think I heard that the funding to put the cameras in is coming out of CTA. And then once they get a ticket, that money goes to the city?
Yeah,
None of it comes back to CTA?
correct.
Not even to offset the cost of installing the cameras?
At some point, like as we said, we talk about scalability and all of that, then we will have continued conversations with the city about that. But for now, nothing's set. As we said, the pilot test for this 2 years is what we're most focused on. We certainly want to go beyond that, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to leave the meeting, so we're gonna transition chair responsibilities over to Robert Castaneda. I don't know if you want to stay seated where you are, you want to sit here, but I'm sure it's fine either way.
I'll stay where I'm.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I'm not cutting you off. Just letting everyone know that
Any other questions? And I can go back to anything else as I bring it up. So, so just the timeline of things. The board approved this Wednesday. Hopefully we'll have a kickoff meeting in the next 2 weeks or so with the vendor. And then from there, we'll have 2 months grading testing, making sure our cameras are in the right position. We've been talking with CDOT right now about kind of lessons learned from what they have worked on the past couple of months. So it's been really helpful. So as I said, in the fall, the first warnings and tickets would be issued. And then 2 years in August, sometime in July, we'd be able to present, or the city would be presenting its findings to city council. And as I said, from there, they have the opportunity to extend that program based on those results. But like I said, just to stress, just not our long-term goal for revenue generation. We really do want to improve the efficacy of our bus lanes. As we put in a lot, we like seeing them. We know that when we can fully utilize them, our buses do go faster. You have higher frequency. It's happy all the way around, right? And our operational performance is improved and less stress for operators maneuvering around those parked vehicles. And we'll decide on the streets that we want to focus on. Right now, we're a little bit focused on Dearborn, Chicago, and Loop Link area, of course. But we're open as we see if there's certainly more complaints about certain areas, we will take that into account of our final locations of our testing. But like I said, we can move the buses around so we can cover more ground as well for this testing.
Thank you so much for sharing. Does anybody have any final questions before we transition? So much, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So I guess maybe less a question, more a comment, but despite my personal reservations with issues like the funds generated by these tickets going to the city instead of the transit association enforcing their right of way and having those funds go to establish delivery zones and better infrastructure for the businesses along the routes. I think this is possibly like some of the most important work in the entire agency that you're doing. Every time my bus is in a designated bus lane, but misses a light because there are non-buses in the bus lane, that makes it a lot less likely that I'm going to ride that bus next time.
Makes sense.
So I think this is great work and thank you for doing it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there was just at the end of that. Sorry, this is, I'll let you.
Yeah, John Sherwinski, I'm Director of Service Planning and Traffic Engineering at CTA. Apology, had a conflict in my schedule, but wanted to join Angela up here, working on this project with her.
So yeah, we're near the end, but yeah, there was talks about, I think the revenue, which said go back to the city, but I forget if you had more details about, so it just goes back to a pool, but I.
Oh, like what that revenue goes to specifically? I don't, I believe it just goes to a general.
General fund.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
But the city does, built out the bus lane, so the money for that infrastructure is coming from the city, so, yeah. Hand in hand, same as the bike lanes as well, if there's delineated and the paint and all of that, so.
Yep. Was there a request by for some of that revenue to at least cover the cost of the pilot program of the $350,000?
I don't believe there was, I think, and really with like the main goal in our mind is to drive down the infractions, so our bus lanes are clear, so I think there is like little sensitivity. We don't want it, we don't want to be doing this to get money, to get revenue, right? We want to do this to keep our bus lanes clear. That's our main motivating factor here. So I think that was kind of some of the thinking of the revenue, but I don't know if there were, any detailed questions.
I'm concerned because, next meeting, we talked about the CTA fiscal cliff, how they're going to save the money, federal, climate. So just, why we can't get the revenue since it is a problem currently.
Yeah, no, and that's a really good point. And we can bring that up to some decision makers about this paper.
Yeah, if any, I would like this specific point to be brought up to the board in our next review. It's embarrassing, I think.
But I do like that we're not thinking about it as something that we want to just generate revenue.
Right.
From citizens for the infraction, because we got so much of that already in the city with red lights and all this kind of stuff that goes on in the neighborhoods. Parking in front of your house and getting a ticket because you didn't move it fast enough for street cleaning.
Yeah.
Really, we're driving people out of this city. We got to figure out ways how we still do what you want to do, but not tax people out of the city.
Right, yeah.
I do appreciate that.
Yeah, and in our mind, ideally, this program will continue and we won't write any tickets in 2 years because everyone will be following the laws, or
exactly. So.
Yep, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, I think it's great to make this a recommendation to the board. Board was briefed on this for their board meeting this month, and they share the sentiments of interest and perhaps some revenue share. So I think hearing that support from the Citizens Advisory Board would be even more helpful. So good recommendations.
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing. For the sake of time, we still have a couple more items on our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we have in discussion for Bus Vision.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Meter. I'm the Senior Manager for Bus Strategic Planning here at CTA. I've been at CTA about 9 years now, working, doing a lot of work in bus priority infrastructure and planning around that.
Everyone, I'm Kevin Peralta. I work with Jason. He's my manager. I'm a strategic planner, working on the bus side as well. So Bus Vision is one of my main projects, and I'm excited to be here before you all.
So the Bus Vision project, I think a lot of you have some familiarity with it. This is my first time before you guys, so I'll kind of skip over some of the history, but just to really quickly cover it. Over the past few years, Bus Vision Framing Report was developed, which kind of set the groundwork to look at our service coverage and demographics and really assess the way that's serving our city and opportunities that it could change, and kind of laid the groundwork for robust public outreach, because really hearing from the community and our citizens and our riders is the main goal here that we're trying to get at. So this past summer, we launched the first phase of preliminary outreach. We did some public engagement activities such as pop-ups at Farmers Market, at Taste of Chicago, at Community Street Fests, things like that. And then also wrote a survey, asking several questions about rider experience, where people are trying to go, what they liked, disliked about the bus, things like that. That was promoted not only at the pop-up events, but through emails, social media. We had digital ads and posters on buses and a system with QR codes that could be scanned. And also had some structured discussions with the Transportation Equity Network, where they reached out to some community leaders interested in transit as well. So the survey, thus far, we've gotten over 10,000 responses. So, really good feedback. But we know that, with our limited scope and, that initial round, it was, still there's a lot more to be done to kind of drill into what people really want. And we want to go into more robust outreach. I will note that one of the main takeaways we heard from these initial surveys, one of the loudest things was, to have a frequent network. I know you mentioned earlier about transfers and, how that being really a tough point for people in their journey, and to really facilitate, the transfer experience and also just the rider experience in general. We want people to be able to, just be able to walk out to a bus stop and reliably know that, there's buses, that the bus is going to come quickly, and same thing at the transfer points, to really get rid of that friction at that location. So this year, 20 bus routes are going to be added to the new frequent network. Will mean that there's 10 minutes or less headways all day, every day, including the weekends, including midday. A lot of our routes have or had that already during the peak hours, but this is really, serving what we heard that, during the middle of the day, it's not only that rush hour commute that needs that robust service. People need that convenience all the time, all over the city. So, while for funding constraints, we weren't able to put it on every bus route all the time, which we would love. Some key routes were identified, for create that, kind of grid to be able to make these transfers, geographic coverage in the city, and also feedback from the community, and really looking at, with our limited resources, what would be the best routes to do this. I think in your handout, you have a map of what's being rolled out this year. So that's kind of one of the first steps we've taken on that, the initial results that we've heard. So just to kind of give an update of where we are now, currently we're in procurement and negotiations with consultant to do a more robust phase of public outreach. The part of the scope of the work that's coming is to define the specific, methods and, the public outreach plan. But, on a high level, we envision a series of like in-person public meetings in different parts of the city, and also virtual engagement opportunities, as well as, targeted outreach with focus groups, groups like you all here, and any feedback that, you guys have, now or, at any time, you can let us know, because we'd be really interested in knowing, and from your point of view, what would be the most effective way to reach out to the communities and, hear the voices that, we need to really come up with the best solutions to our bus system. Also part of the scope of work is to have a final report of recommendations. So that could mean things, everything from infrastructure improvements, like we were talking about, like where do we really need those bus lanes and bus bulbs and traffic signal improvements, to service improvements, which could mean, extending, an existing route to, serve a destination that, a lot of people need to get to or transfer to. It could mean, rerouting a current route, adding back or a brand new route that, no longer exists. Things like that, that really, we want to have a system that serves the needs of our customers the best. And, the only way to get to that is to hear what everybody wants and needs and, try to make that happen. So, it could be service delivery to minimum frequency standards like this frequent network. If this is really successful, we'd love to see that expanded to more areas as well. I guess looking forward, we, like I said, would love to get feedback on, the networks that you guys are in touch with. Really, how do we get the word out there? Or I guess, more importantly, the converse of that, how do we get the word to us so that we can, incorporate all that feedback and really, allocate service and prioritize infrastructure where it's needed the most. We have Bus Vision website, which was launched last year, which is ctabusvisionproject.com. I think that's in your handout materials as well as email address specifically for Bus Vision. That was provided with the survey. If people have questions at any time, if you guys want to, you think of something at any time, you can email that address, which is also linked at the website. And, that'll get directly to us so that we can, have that feedback for ourselves and also to provide to, as part of this report and outreach that's coming. So I guess that's just a quick update. We don't have a presentation for you. There's a handout in your materials, I believe, that just kind of gives a rundown of what was, taken away from the framing report, at a high level. But, at this time, just want to open it up to any questions, feedback, concerns that you guys have about this project.
Interesting that we got these presentations back to back. I would love the camera, they would have called Bus Vision. Right? And this should be something else.
Can I go work for the marketing department?
I'll open it up. Anybody comments, questions?
I had just three semi-quick things. One, to what extent has CTA been engaged in the Lakeshore Drive redesign discussion? Like Lakeshore Drive buses are seeing the most successful, transit routes in the city, and as the plan currently stands, so there's kind of neglected that. I wonder to what extent that relates to Bus Vision's mission and to what extent CTA has been working with IDOT.
So CTA has been for years at this point working with IDOT and CDOT, promoting our stance and trying to make known that our strong preference for any type of projects that will prioritize the buses themselves. As you guys, I'm sure, are aware, it's not under CTA's jurisdiction or purview to make the final decision, but we are currently still in talks, I think, with some changes in administration at IDOT and and CDOT and frankly at CTA as well, since those conversations were going on years ago. I don't think that it's said and done deal. That being said, I don't right now can't speak to exactly where this is going and how it stands, but yeah, CTA has been and is still actively engaged in those conversations. That kind of overlaps with separate from this. There's a Better Streets for Buses report, which you may be familiar with as well. So separate from Bus Vision, the Better Streets for Buses report includes multiple routes around the city that in general, whenever there's any type of project initiative, funding opportunity, those are corridors that will be first and foremost identified for looking at, investments in transit priority infrastructure. And the North Lakeshore Drive is included in that. I think that helps bolster, our voice, and we actually have something to point to. This is one of the corridors that, can and should be identified for bus priority.
That's great. And then secondly, just wanted to make the point that I appreciate the emphasis on like north-south connectors. I think that that's one of the weaknesses in our transit system as it currently stands. The way that the trains are set up, it's all centered on the loop, but people don't work in the loop as much as they used to. So I think just emphasizing frequency on north-south routes is super important. And then thirdly, have there been discussions about reinstating the Lincoln Avenue bus or the Clyde bus?
As of late, I don't think there's been a specific, focus on those routes. Part of what we're getting at, with this more robust outreach, is not only going to be high level citywide recommendations, and that will be part of it, but also, if we hear resounding, calls for, needs for, or, a good case for reinstating any routes, including those, that would be, the type of recommendation we're looking for, and that would be considered part of the recommendations report.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Yeah, sure. So the contract that we're still finalizing for the consultant support for public outreach, could we get a ballpark number for that?
Because it's currently under negotiations, I don't know if I can reveal that at this time, but we hope to be under contract in the next couple of months. At that time it will be public record, but yeah.
Is that common to contract consultants for public outreach?
Yes, it is a strategy that CTA uses, multiple projects, everything from the mega projects like, Red Line Extension, RPM to, more of the service focused projects as well. So.
Yeah, okay. I'm a little disheartened that CTA doesn't have in-house public outreach professionals.
We do. There is a government community relations department. They, I think, just are very, have a high workload just with the day-to-day coordinating with, communities, aldermen, things on, just the baseline CTA that, everybody's dealing with at all times. So, we have a funding opportunity, grant funded opportunity that, specifically we had this, these funds available that, can really bolster that. It's a lot of, coordinating the meetings, getting the word out there, doing the marketing materials. But then, it's not like we're just going to hire them and say, okay, you guys do this. Like, Kevin and I will be there at these meetings, alongside with them. It's really just, we had this funding that enabled us to do more robust support and really, have, get the word out there, in a louder, bigger way than we'd be able to just on our own.
Other than that, I've heard really good feedback from my neighbors about the frequent network changes.
Oh, excellent. Glad to hear that.
Anybody else, questions, comments? I will say that having partnered with the city and other city agencies, it is common to do those types of contracts for community outreach. Just because they're like so short windows, and you kind of need this infusion of help to get that out. And it's always hard to balance long-term staffing compared to short-term goals. So definitely understand that, but also understand if you hear, a city serving agency needs help communicating with the city. Yeah, so but understanding it's more complex than that. So before we transition topics, we have one more topic. Anybody else? Questions, comments for?
Wait, can I just piggyback on your comment?
Sure.
On leveraging, there's consultants that you're negotiating with that contract, but I'm curious, is there, you don't have to disclose the terms of the contract, but is there a desire to leverage the internal networks of CTA for that outreach in any way, shape, or form? Got a vast majority of networks here.
Yes, and yes, we would, like I said, the stakeholder or the public outreach plan is part of their scope to be developed, so it hasn't been finalized, but, and I envision, that, reaching out to you, the community organizations we already talked to, I mentioned the Transportation Equity Network that we worked with last time. We kind of have a Rolodex, if you will, of community advocates and community-based organizations that we're not waiting for them to discover themselves. We want to keep those conversations going. We want to hear from you guys, both directly, which could be, via contacting us, starting tomorrow at the website, or once we get going, we'll, continue to be able to brief you, and, always welcome any feedback. So, both from yourselves and if you, specific organizations in the community or, voices that, not have heard yet, or that, consultant may not have, known about, like, the further reach that we can get from more diverse voices, that's what we're really striving for.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. And since the contract hasn't been signed, it's not too late to change bus vision to the cameras, right? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Next, we have our last topic of the agenda is update discussion regarding the CTA's chatbot.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monet Nunnery. I am the business systems analyst for the customer service department, and I work on the chatbot for CTA.
And I spoke earlier, Lucina Lepier's senior manager for customer experience. And our relationship is that our department innovation started off bot projects, sort of incubated it, and then we worked with other internal departments, including customer service, to hand it over. And so Monet and her team are doing a lot of the day-to-day maintenance and that kind of thing.
I don't have any presentation or anything. I'm guessing I'm just open for questions.
Okay.
Discussion?
Yeah, I know that chatbot topic came up a lot in our last meeting. So if you all remember your questions from last meeting, we'll just open the floor up.
Sure, I can break the ice on this one. What metrics do we have surrounding smoking on train reports and response rates?
So I have metrics about the reports, specifically with smoking on the train. That is our highest category that's reported. This year, we're averaging about 1,300 complaints per month.
I had the strangest thing on the L. Someone had lit incense, a large incense.
Oh, wow.
They pushed it into the superstructure of the train. It was flooding the car with it's just simply like besides smoking.
Better than swishes.
Clever.
Right. We know they didn't just open a window.
Better. Cannabis.
Sure, and so for you said 1,300 a month?
On average, yes.
On average, what do we do with them?
So the chatbot, all the complaints that come in go directly to the department that handles that. And I know recently they kind of rolled out an initiative to put like security and things in different areas that are getting a lot of complaints to try to help and combat that. And I'm sure they're working on kind of other things to try to help.
Do you have data on the age demographics of those who actually use the chat box? I'm just concerned about senior citizens who most likely probably are experiencing things, people with disabilities. So I don't know if you have those demographic of you.
We do not. All the information collected from the chatbot is completely anonymous. So people just report. We don't have any information about who's reporting, just the details about the incidents.
One thing that we're supporting too, working on is expanding some of the promotional materials around the tool. So right now it's pretty much, someone organically discovers it on CTA's website by going to the contact us page or by clicking on the button. And so what we're going to be doing over the next several months is there was a pilot on the Pink Line and on buses that operate out of our 77th Street garage. And so those bus routes include like the Halsted bus, 79th Street bus, Cottage Grove. And so on those vehicles at those stations, there are QR codes where someone can scan the QR code and either complete a short survey to rate their ride or report incident via the chatbot. And so what we're hoping with the system-wide rollout, that QR code promotional messaging campaign, is that we'll have a much more diverse representation of comments that come through the bot, because right now we are certainly over-indexed on north side bus routes and blue and red line, which is not representative of the system, even though there are many high ridership routes in that mix. And so we're hoping that by having a more intentional messaging campaign around the tool, we'll also start to move towards a data set that we know is truer to the real world.
How many reports total are you getting on average?
Now, 3,500 conversations are being started on the chatbot. I would say out of those, that like people that completely go through the flow, it would probably be about maybe about 160 a day on average. So yeah, 3,500 per month, which is about 160 per day. And granted, not all those are complaints. Some of them are people, looking to find the next bus route. So it includes everything.
Anybody else, questions, comments?
What's the true objective of the chat?
I would say one, to continue to collect information to better serve the customers and kind of find ways to improve and other channels to collect data. Currently, customers can call in to report on phone or send emails. And so this is just like another channel to kind of collect information, help find, ways and to improve and initiatives.
Yeah, I think too, when we started the project, I think CTA was averaging around 400 contacts a day through our traditional channels like phone and email. And 400 a day in a system that on a weekday handles over 1 million people, right, is a very small number. And so we wanted to use this project too to test out, okay, how much more reach can we achieve with more customer service channels? And then also, how can we, for the first time, live in a world where there's an expectation of a real-time response or real-time feedback, right? Like if you look at the existing phone and email workflows, like it's very much, hey, I just got home from work and I want to write this long paragraph about my experience, not, hey, I'm on the train right now and something needs to be fixed, right? So we wanted to test out how can CTA live in that world. And so that was certainly how the project started. I think now, looking forward, I think this has also started a conversation around how as an organization do we live in a real-time feedback world? Like how do we cohesively respond across all departments to these types of incidents? And how do we start to establish, workflows to say, hey, someone reported that this door at this train station was broken. We created a work order ticket, and then we can manage the status of that ticket, and then we can report back to the customer, hey, the door was fixed, right? And so now we're starting to have a new conversation entirely about the way we handle customer reported incidents and track that work, which I think was a very different outcome than we thought we were gonna end up with.
Yes, sir.
I want to piggyback actually off the comment we had about CDOT for our last meeting about, when you create that ticket on, CDOT, it gives you back, okay, it was fixed as far as, chatbot, you never know. So I think that was pretty good. I don't know if I said this last time about chatbot, but expanding the outreach to the terminals, for the people that's getting on, for instance, Harlem and Lake, 54th and Cermak, Kimball on the Brown line, things of that nature, that's their end of the line, but also maybe their first point of contact and taking the line through the loop or whatever, or south side, whatever we need to get to. So I would just add that for as an outreach, just bus terminals, main ones, maybe even loop link, but mostly rail terminals.
I would add a conversation we had a little earlier about like facial recognition, and maybe that's just calling it the wrong thing. But the idea with artificial intelligence, we talked about the buses and the buses having cameras to keep track of and the whole process. Really, it's not the cameras, it's the software behind it, right? So if it's a fixed camera or it's a camera on a bus or it's a camera on a train, like if it's all giving the image to the AI is the one who's tracking all that, right? So it could be like, okay, somebody jumped a turnstile, the AI says, okay, who is this? This person just jumped the turnstile, and it's going to keep track of that throughout the system. And tying that kind of with a chatbot, if somebody's giving, and I don't know that if it's artificial intelligence driven or if it's going to be, but with the technologies, right? If you're saying, okay, somebody's smoking on my train and they're wearing a blue suit with a red tie, and you put that into the chatbot, the technology is there, or if we don't have it yet, it will be there for the camera just to pull up, okay, who's the person with the blue suit and the red tie that has something in their mouth, or they keep doing this, right? And I think, right, the assumption that the chatbot is not artificial intelligence driven right now, correct? Or is it? Is it working? Is it the goal?
So I think there's a mix of tools at use, but I think what you're saying is like, how do we intercept issues in real time, right? So I think that's something that as an organization that we're really thinking about, especially because there's so many sensitivities around that. So I think like right now, security group has been working on, okay, how do we start to get involved in the smoking conversation and do so in a way that, isn't, involving the police or really escalating beyond that, like, hey, please put out the cigarette, please get off the train, like keeping it like that and trying to test those waters, but it's certainly a very sensitive issue.
Yeah, and I think the challenge here, right, and I said it earlier, right, I think, when you're walking on a public sidewalk, there's this, in America, there's this idea like we should have this certain sense of like not being tracked and monitored. I don't think the exception is or the expectation is the same when you are getting onto a train, right? Because you are paying to use a service and you are basically entering into an agreement to be monitored, and especially with the biggest issue being public safety in this space, right? Yes, we need to be sensitive regarding like, yeah, we don't want to criminalize people and we would rather say, please don't do that. But I think we're in the state of the city right now where most people, if it was just as easy as saying, please don't do that, everybody would just say, please don't do that. We'd have to talk about this, right? The fact of the matter is like you deal with very, sometimes over the top responses. And it's like people are just in a situation, well, I don't want anybody, to pull a gun on me or to pull a knife on me or to, jump me because I said, please don't smoke on the train. And so while the hope is that like we eventually have a society where you can just say, hey, please don't, disregard everybody else who's in this enclosed container. Until we get there, I think we're going to have to innovate, right? And do it thoughtfully. But I would say, to me, and I would love to open it up to the rest of you, I think when I enter a train, like there's an just like when we get into a plane or you go into an airport, you're entering into this public space and you're like, you recognize that some of your freedoms are being lost in that process.
Just a quick clarification and just a statement. So one of my friends, Jason Cummins, works for Google. He represents Google in developing the chatbot for CTA. And he expressed, I know it's always been a lot of questions around the chatbot. I don't know if maybe it's a possibility that we get somebody from one of the developers or some people to represent to talk about maybe some of these possibilities that we're asking. If you guys can't answer them, maybe have them come and just talk to us about some possibilities of enhancing the chatbot. That's something possible.
Yeah, I think, like we mentioned with the customer journey, I think what we really try to start with is like, okay, what's the real world problem that we're trying to solve? And I'll give you an example, like, the real problem that we're trying to solve with some upcoming enhancements is, how do we have an accurate picture of all the issues that happen on CTA? So right now, a lot of the conversation flows that were designed in the first round correspond to, hey, at CTA, we know people report generally these 6 or 7 types of issues. But we don't know how much of the real world does that represent. So one enhancement we're working on is, okay, let's allow folks to type their issue with using their own words, right? They don't have to press a button or be guided on a specific flow. How can we live in that world where people are just telling us what's wrong and we're always able to accurately send them to the right flow or identify the right topic, right? And that will allow us, the organization, to have a very true understanding of all the problems that are out there in the world that we should be thinking about. And so if you guys have other issues, like maybe more questions around safety and security, service reliability, or other customer service topics, I think we can work there, try to identify maybe potential solutions.
I think based on my own experience and the data that you described, I think smoking is just a huge problem. I haven't noticed an improvement since, this big problem started like I don't remember this being a huge issue before COVID, really. There was some times, but I don't remember the last time I was on a red line or purple line train that it didn't smell like weed or cigarette smoke. And it's really like, it is a bad experience. It contributes to that perception of lack of safety. So I guess like the problem has existed. We now have pretty solid data based on what you're describing, that it's a problem. So I think in terms of like, priorities for turning the data we're getting into action, I think smoking is one of the top things. And I think it has a lot of other downstream effects on improving ridership, on improving perceptions of safety, on a lot of things. And it seems like, it's a difficult problem to solve, right? The actual implementation of it is probably more difficult, but it is a low-hanging fruit in terms of like problems that exist on the system.
Yeah, I literally today, when I took the train from Cermak, from my South Loop space to here, I got on one that had smoke. I was like, oh man, I'm looking around trying to figure out like, who is it? I couldn't figure out where it came from. So after about, I don't know, 2 stops, I just say, look, I'm gonna get off and jump on in another car. So I had to change my whole kind of concept. It's inconvenient. Like literally you got to figure out how to deal with this. Like nobody's gonna want to drive. I can't take smoke. I can't take that.
Oh, let me take this conversation a step further. We have the reports. I think the chatbot works. We know where the problems are. We know what the problems are. You said we might be moving some security forces to stations that have high frequency of these reports. But I think we've come a point, we've done this for a year and a half. We know smoking's an issue for the whole time. Like, where's the buck stop? Where are these reports going? What metrics are being pushed to reduce smoking? And how can the people of Chicago stop being embarrassed by the smoke on our trains? Like, what are we doing to address it? And I know that's frankly outside the scope of the chatbot team. Right? That is outside the scope of the chatbot team. But this is the exact data that we want, that we need to address this problem. And so who's getting the data? Who's taking responsibility for it? I want names, I don't expect them to be within the chatbot team because the chatbot works. It's good. I can do a smoke report in 20 seconds flat. It's easy. It's good. The chatbot is good. We have the data. What next?
Can I also add that we have data, right? I don't think this is a data collecting or data mining issue. This is a cultural issue.
Correct.
This is a cultural issue that the CTA hasn't either addressed resources to stop, hasn't gotten creative or innovative to do simple things that can address culture. There's this saying I absolutely love: people don't quit jobs, people quit bosses. Same thing is for the CTA. I'm not a frequent rider anymore because I'm quitting the smoke on the CTA, not because it's CTA, but it's cultural. And you don't have to allocate tons and tons of resources or bring the Google developer or bring Google out here or do procurement processes to collect more data. It's a cultural thing and the buck stops with it starts with leadership.
I don't want to beat a dead horse with a stick, but like literally today, this was my first really smoke experience. It was like almost unbearable. Like literally, it's not 1971 where everybody's used to smoke, right? Like I'm just not used to smoke. It made me get off the train and go to another car. And if I would have gone to a smoke car, I would have jumped off and got it. I'm just serious about it.
I saw this hand in right here.
I view this as, it's not the smoking issue. It's a societal issue of disregard for not only others, but basic rules.
Yeah, it's true.
The question is, yes, we can enforce the issue of smoking, but there are other problems that are of equal significance on the CTA that need to be considered for being enforced if we're going to change the societal, the systemic societal problem of disregard for the people around.
Thank you.
I just want to piggyback on three of you, especially on camera. I've never heard nothing like that before, especially when people do that. It's literally a societal issue. You'll have people that have to be taken off the red line with a K9 and you say, okay, we'll get off the train. No, they're going to stand there and say, force you to get off the train. So it's not just about, oh, well, can you do it? We have to look at the data and we have to, start doing things from a societal issue, because if it was really easy, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now, but we're having a discussion. So that means obviously there's something wrong. I just want to point that out because that was very, very unique. So thank you to Kirby, Sonia, and Roger.
Chap, I think, so sorry. None of this is directed at. This is open feedback. Yeah.
Right.
Prompted the conversation. But to the point made, the chatbot is working. I know it's got a lot of strong support from folks who serve on this advisory board. And it's great to see a tool that was created by innovation and now being implemented in the mainstream. And I look forward to as artificial intelligence is brought into that kind of being a key to where you want to go, like what are all the other things? Because with the technology available now, you don't need so much people power, like it's computing power and it's there. And, you know, it's like, we're supposed to have the world's most amazing quantum computing site. And so we should be a leader in technology in all areas, especially in our public transit. Does anybody have any closing remarks before we?
I guess I'll reiterate, the chatbot works. We've got the data. I'd like it if we asked the board, what are they doing to reduce smoking? Let's get people off trains or let's get them to stop smoking. I don't care if it's cultural. What are we doing?
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, chatbot team. That concludes our regular agenda. Secretary Greenlee, do we have any other new business?
We have no new business.
Awesome. Then I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Chair recognizes Peter, motion to adjourn. Can I get a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Peter Henderson, seconded by Ryan McCray, that the meeting be adjourned. We'll take a roll call vote. Scott Vanderwill.
Yes.
Daniel Stanley.
Yes.
Tracy Powell.
Yes.
Ryan McCray.
Yes.
Peter Henderson.
Yes.
Del Rio.
Yes.
And Rob Castaneda.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you all for coming today and sharing information.
Thank you so much. This is a great meeting.
All right.